So thanks a lot for joining us. My name is Atri Chatterjee, and
I'm Hormuz Romer.
So we are co-chairs of this track, Cybersecurity this morning. It goes from 10 to 12:30. We've got a great lineup of speakers. We've got, that's Hormuz and me up there on the screen, and we also have two other folks here who really helped us with this, Niharika and Praveen, who you've probably seen helping you check in and so on. So, as you can see, you've probably seen the agenda. We've got a really good lineup. We're going to start with two very dynamic folks. Scott McGrew, who you probably all know from NBC and his very popular podcast, Sand Hill Road, who is going to be interviewing and having a conversation with serial entrepreneur, serial CEO, visionary builder of category-leading companies, Jeff Hudson, who has got some fantastic experiences that I'm sure all of you will really benefit from. So, Scott and Jeff, welcome.
So I host, at least I did before the pandemic, I host the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award here in Northern California. And some of the past winners have been, tiny little startups like GoPro, LinkedIn, back when they were tiny. So one of the things that impressed me most about Jeff was that he had won the Entrepreneur of the Year Award in Utah, where his company is based. Of course, these days, nobody's based anywhere. Have a seat. Let's talk about, as we talk about security, let us start with your most harrowing security story.
Okay, and I've got to make a choice live, and I wanted to look at the audience and decide which way I go.
Kind of a choose-your-own adventure?
Yep, but first of all, let me just say that when I was asked to join and come and speak with you, I said the last thing I want to do is put up PowerPoint slides. So I called Scott, who Scott's got a great reputation, and said, hey, would you interview me on stage? And he said, sure, I will. And so that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a back and forth with a journalist who will pull no punches. Okay, my most harrowing experience in my life was being kidnapped at gunpoint and held hostage for about 24 hours. And so
you know this is cybersecurity, right?
Yep.
But go on, this is fascinating.
And so the reason that's, I think, relevant, actually, is that in cybersecurity, you got to learn to run towards the problem. You got to learn to run towards the trouble. And you got to be comfortable when there's a fire, a gunshot, and a car crash, whatever it is, to run toward it. And that's actually one of the ways that I have built the team at Venafi, is we always sort of look for people that their first instinct is to run towards danger instead of away from it. Because there is a bad guy in cybersecurity. There is a bad guy, and he wants to wreak havoc on all of us. And that's the job in cybersecurity, is to stop the bad guy.
I got to follow up. Give me the 2 minutes of why did someone hold you and kidnap you, and how did you get out?
So we were on a friend of mine and I from UC Davis were on a marine specimen collection expedition to support a PhD thesis. The research was heavy metal concentrations in brachiopods. So we spent most of our time down at between 20 feet and 100 feet, all the way around Mexico collecting specimens. So we're in a place now that's very famous, but back then it was just nothing, called Tulum. And we parked our Volkswagen bus right next to the pyramid. Today you can't get within 100 yards of the pyramid. And so the federales in that part of the world, the states Quintana Roo, all federales are kind of sometimes can go rogue. And in this case, one of the federales took a camper, a French-Canadian woman, into the jungle to do probably bad things to her. She escaped. He came running out with just his pants on, was firing at her as she was running down the beach. And he panicked and he came running up to us and he put the gun right in my head and said, is this your car? And I said, yes, it is. And he said, okay, I need you to drive me somewhere. And so my Spanish became extraordinarily fluent immediately. And we drove about 3 hours through the jungle, and I kind of took charge and convinced him that whatever he was thinking of doing wasn't the right thing to do, and then we kind of got him on our side, you know, a reverse Stockholm syndrome. And we convinced him we should drop him off so he could walk back to the Army installation and not do anything else. So that's what happened.
Okay, all right. So cybersecurity, machine identity management, you know, we spend billions of dollars protecting machines from people. I have a thing in my pocket that I've got to boop on my computer. It goes to my phone. I put in the secret code. I add the password. The NBC system is protected from bad guys who are people. But you work with protecting from machines, that we don't spend as much money protecting machines from machines, do we?
Well, so the best way to think about this is two actors on a network, people and machines. And people use usernames and passwords to identify themselves to machines. The machines have to identify themselves to each other. They don't use usernames and passwords. They use machine identities. Machines are code. Think of machine learning. Is it gears and levers? No, it's code. This has really been fun, actually, because machine learning has driven this point home to the world. Machines need identities, and the identities need to be protected just like human identities are. And so we created the category called machine identity management. Did it about 7 years ago, and it was really interesting because when I first told Gartner about it, they laughed. And today, if you could look in the Gartner literature, there's a lot about machine identity management. So anyway, we protect machine identities, protect and manage machine identities for world's largest corporations. You can't go to Starbucks, you can't use Zoom, you can't go to a bank, you can't get insurance, life or health insurance, you can't shop, you can't get on a plane, either because the plane wasn't made or because it wasn't being flown. You can't use your passport. You can't use a credit card. You can't stay in a hotel without relying on Venafi. So this idea of protecting machine identities is caught on in a big.
Well, and you mentioned banks. I mean, when I'm using, say, my app on Bank of America or whatnot, it is more than just two machines that are interacting. I mean, it's not just my phone and some server at B of A.
That is correct. And digital transformation kind of happened in the data center. And it was sort of that, right? There was a client and there was a server, but now it's exploded out of the data center. Kubernetes is the new Linux for cloud native. And for those of you who know anything about Kubernetes, you know that there are multiple virtual machines, multiple clusters, multiple microservices, and each one of those has to use a machine identity to mutually authenticate with each other. And that is a very ripe attack surface. We know the threat models. They're happening now where bad guys want to inject themselves into the new modern data center, the new modern cloud operating model, which is the underpinnings are Kubernetes.
And there's still, social hacking and whatnot, but the bad guys are finding there's still vulnerability in machines where perhaps there's no more vulnerability in humans, or less vulnerability.
A little less vulnerability until it became very popular about 4 or 5 months ago to understand what's going on in generative AI. And so this is a whole nother attack surface that's being created two ways. One is through generative AI, almost anybody can create code now, can create machines. And so it's been democratized. It used to be the high priests were the only ones that could create code, and they worked in their CI/CD pipelines. The individual that tells ChatGPT to create some kind of an application doesn't use a CI/CD pipeline. So that's a risk. The other risk are the machines that are learning themselves, the data, and the provenance of the data, the poisoning of the data. There's just all kinds of new attack surfaces now. And in all cases, what you have to do is you have to have an identity involved at every step of the way on the machines, so you know, where'd this come from? Who did this? What made it? The biggest piece of our world is built on attribution. And for anybody in here that's in InfoSec, your job's real simple. Allow access to that which you want to have access to data and applications, and deny access to that which you don't. And in a world where there's no more firewalls, no more perimeter, it's identity-based. You got to check the identity and say, yeah, it's authentic, it's valid, it's governed correctly, I will use it for access and authorization.
I assume at Venafi you are pursuing AI. Is AI more of an advantage to the security team or to the bad guys, or is it kind of a wash?
It's any technology, and we all now see this and know this, is a sword, and there are two edges. And both edges are very sharp with this technology, and so it's how it's used. So it's not a wash in terms of one cancels the other, but there are incredible dangers, and there are incredible opportunities. And so one of the things we're telling everybody is, you better think through a policy, because we've already seen it a couple times where all the intellectual property of a company has been sucked out because somebody used a generative AI and they put their data set in, like their source code or something else, said, help me do this source code better. You'd be surprised. I see some heads shaking, oh my God, no, it's terrible. But there aren't policies, people aren't trained. I mean, this is tantamount to a nuclear weapon if we don't take it seriously and do something about it quickly. So I think everybody needs a policy. Why a policy? Because right now we don't have the right tools in place to actually protect this without slowing everything down. And then if you slow something down, the other guy doesn't slow down, you lose. So you got to go fast and secure at the same time.
I think that's right. I've asked that question of a number of companies who don't even have policies at all and aren't realizing how many of their employees are just on their own, as we encourage employees to do. Learn this new thing, try it out, give it a shot, because some of it's web-based. They can't even, they don't even know it's happening necessarily, and there's no policy in place. You would have to teach, if you wanted to be a defensive AI, you would have to teach that AI about the architecture of the thing you wanted to defend, right?
Well, exactly. In fact, good AI will actually increase the defenses. And that's needed because you've got really good AI that's increased the attacks. So,
yeah, that goes back to my...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so we are, and I know other companies are too, spending a lot of time trying to figure out how we use this in a sustainable way going forward to protect organizations that are, it's every organization because everybody's subject to this new phenomenon. This is the next evolutionary step. You can't stop it. In fact, anybody here in InfoSec, how many people that have on their title in their mind, I'm in security? Okay, you cannot slow things down. Those days are over. They're really important. You have to think of yourself as helping people go faster and at the same time go safer. And then the people that develop things, they have to think about how do I go faster and at the same time make it safer. So it's not governance. One gets better and one gets worse. They both got to go up together. Really important.
You started a number of companies. You've raised a lot of money over the years. The first startup was what, 1980?
1980.
So you're working with Charles Babbage on the first computer, as I recall.
Right, it was levers, gears, balls, and
yeah, you did the crank.
I'm
yeah.
that old.
Yeah. The easy question would be, what's changed since 1980? I'm going to flip it. What's the same? What has been true since 1980 in your industry?
So if you want to be successful starting a company, I learned a long time ago that there were 3 things you had to do. And there was a mindset. So this was the foundation of being able to be an entrepreneur. One was you had to be an expert. Because you're in a startup. You're in a startup, and there's a lot of people that are doing things, and you got to be an expert in things they're not an expert in. You can't do things incrementally better because somebody else is out there and is going to be better than you, a lot faster than you, because they've come up the learning curve. Be an expert. Take a stand. You can't say, yeah, we do that. You got to really focus. Take a stand and be really focused, and then you got to control the timing. So be an expert, take a stand, control the timing. And you got to have an attitude that goes with that. And so this T-shirt was given to me by somebody not too long ago. I don't know if you guys can see that. It says,
"Be the lion."
Be the lion. And I thought it was appropriate here because I spent a lot of my summers up in Yuba City, Marysville area. And I got to know a guy named Didar Singh Baines, for those of you that know Didar or in the Sikh community. And he was sort of the godfather there, and I was driving a forklift on his property loading trucks as he was harvesting peaches, and a truck driver went out into the field and started stealing watermelons. I said, you can't do it. So I'm a 12-year-old blonde-headed kid, and I got in a fight with the truck driver, who was about 6'2", green teeth, big hands, and he was pounding on me, and I was pounding on him. And Didar came over and threw his big arms around me, pulled me back. He said, down, Cher, down, Cher. So those of you who don't know, Cher is tiger or lion, right? So that's the other thing you got to do, is you got to have that attitude that I'm just going to go make this happen. I'm going to take on everybody and everything in the world and be okay with that.
Well, somebody told me when I asked about you, they said, Jeff does not sleep. They said that you can outwork anyone. Does that intimidate your employees? I mean, you always want to go home after the boss goes home, right? I guess it's a little bit more convenient now that everyone works from home.
So well, that's true. Everybody's already at home. So the question is, what's balance? And that's a really interesting question. And you know, if you ever watch Outlier or you read Outliers, the book, I've had a lot of reps. And I've determined that balance is different from everybody. My balance as an entrepreneur, my balance as the CEO of a company is to work like that. And I grew up in agriculture, so I know that, right? That's what happens. Not everybody's that way. And so everybody just forget how much you work, how long you work, you punch in, punch out, where you work from. It's can you be a great team member and give the team what it needs to be successful? And so that's all we think about is, are you doing what the team needs you to do? We're all team members. Are we doing what the team needs me to do? Right now, the team needs me to work that hard.
You mentioned being held by gunpoint. You mentioned getting into a fight with a truck driver, but I read an interview with you at one point that if you weren't sitting up here being the CEO of a security company, you'd be a member of the clergy.
Right. So somebody asked me that question, and it was on a stage like this, and I thought, whoa, what would I be? And so I thought about it. I said, I would be in the clergy, and everyone went, clergy? You? I said, or F-35 fighter pilot. They said, what? How are those two related? How did you get there? I said, because for both of those, what you have to do is have intense concentration in the present moment. And so it just sort of popped into my mind, and that's what it takes to be a CEO. I mean, you've got to be incredibly present because every moment is a moment of truth. And so that requires presence. So that was the answer, and everybody was scratching their head when I answered that way.
We have a few minutes left. How do I know that I need you, that my enterprise has gotten to the point? Is it just simply that I have two machines on a network? How do I know that it's time to get into, and it doesn't have to be your brand, but into machine identity management?
So there's a simple diagnostic, and that is, do systems fail because machine identities expire and you didn't know that they were going to expire? And that is happening more and more and more. And so it used to be 10 years ago, it was set it and forget it, and then it was a 5-year validity period, then it was a 3-year validity period, and then about 2 years ago, Google, when they put Symantec pretty much out of business, they said it's going to be a 380-day validity period, and they just announced it's going to be a 90-day validity period. So if you think of renewing these things, really simple thing, if you don't have visibility, you don't have the right policies, you don't have automation around it.
This is essentially what happened to Equifax, right?
Exactly. It was the underlying cause. A lot of people said it was SQL injection, but it wasn't. It was somebody actually, there was an expiration, but then there was a man-in-the-middle attack using an identity. Some machine showed up and said, yeah, I'm Equifax machine, and it got access. In the stepping stone attack, it moved north-south into the network, and then it moved laterally.
Well, we started with a scary story. Let's end with what scares you. Is that, and it can be a security thing, or it can be part of being a CEO. What keeps you up at night? We've already established you don't sleep.
So it's a bigger, the answer is a big answer, and that is that I think our very fundamental way of life, with the freedom we enjoy here, is under attack. And I'm not sure democracy is going to win out. We are in a period of deglobalization now. We're in a period where, remember when the saying was EFF, Electronic Freedom Foundation, information wants to be free? Remember that? It's deglobalizing, it's becoming less and less free. And so just our freedoms are under attack, and you can see it in democracy. And I worry about startups because back in the day, we thought about, well, how can we write some software and figure out new workflows and figure out ways to make the human experience better. And today, a lot of that's being done, or will be done, by generative AI, right? Well, what makes generative AI really work well? The training data, the data set that it's trained on. As a startup, you always got to ask the question, if this is the environment we're in, how does a startup get that data? And how is it defensible? And if you're in a startup and you haven't been asked this question by the VCs you're working with, get new VCs, because they're not tuned into what's going to happen. So I worry about the days of just inventing technology and writing better code and all that are done, and are we in a place where it's the availability of the data, and there's a concentration of it. Obviously, we know Google and others have a lot of data, and there's other places that have a lot of data. Is this going to become an impediment to innovation? And so that's really what I worry about, because ever since I came out of IBM, where I was a coder in a mainframe division, I've been in startup land, and getting from where we were with me joining the company, 17 people, 5 customers, to today, thousands of customers. We had no revenue then, multiple hundred millions of dollars of revenue, 500 people in the company. I think the startup, that's where innovation happens. Really doesn't happen that much. So if maybe all that old school innovations move to generative AI, it's all about the data. We've been saying that for how long? Data's the new oil. It's all about the data. But I think it really now is all about the data.
Well, Jeff Hudson, I appreciate the opportunity to ask you questions. I appreciate the invitation.
Well, thank you very much, Scott. And I would like to ask the audience, did he do a good job? That's awesome.
I'll be invited back.
Much.
Now, the good news is the next guy's even better, because Chris is a fantastic. I could really put you on the spot, couldn't I? Be like, he starts with the funniest jokes, right? No pressure. No pressure. Jeff Hudson, thanks again.
Thank you, Scott.
Pleasure.